Hey, Stephanie.
What's up, Rinnie?
Hi. I was just thinking about our last podcast series remember we did on habits?
I do remember.
And I am actually so happy that we are both getting back into the habit of our podcast.
Well, hold up. Do you have new habits you're doing now? Because I know I am.
Yes, I have been doing yoga every morning for 40 minutes.
Wonderful. And guess what I've been doing?
What are you
I've
doing?
been writing away, girl. So anyway, go ahead.
Oh, that novel's coming along.
Well, maybe not a novel, but I'm writing.
Anyway, I'm so happy we're both getting back into our new habits and
Yep.
our habit of our podcast. It's a new year, 2025,
Yep.
with new entrepreneurs coming to Web, which we're really excited about. And we're also forming some new exciting partnerships. We're going to have some good events this year and lots of fun projects. And as we begin navigating our way forward, I was wondering if you could share one thing that you really trust about this new year, 2025.
I absolutely can, Rennie, because I've been doing a lot of reflecting on 2024 in December, and I'm kind of still reflecting. And the one thing that I keep reflecting on is trust and how it was a key informant in how I'm leading and in the process of how we're building web. So, one of the main takeaways that I am realizing is that it's easier for me to tell y'all what to do when you trust me. Oh, I didn't say that how I really, well, actually, I did say that how I really wanted to say it. But it's better when your team can actually trust you. And the other thing that I am realizing is that when I'm learning something new, or I'm building something new, or I'm doing something that I've never done before, I really have to trust the process.
Wow, that's awesome, Stephanie. I'm so happy that you shared all that. But now I'm also really excited to get on with today's conversation. And guess what, Steph? This next series of our podcast, we're going to be talking about trust.
I know, so let's get into it.
Dear listeners and entrepreneurs, welcome back to the WEBB Remedy podcast. I'm Rinnie, the co-founder and associate director of WEBB Squared, your podcast host, and I also do the editing and producing of the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Rennie. It's so good to be back doing our podcast. And listeners, I am Stephanie Terry, the other co-founder and the executive director of WEBB Squared.
As we mentioned in our opening, it's a new year and a new season of planning and growth for Web. We are stepping into this new year knowing there's a lot happening in our world right now. Stephanie, some of our fundamental systems feel very fragile right now.
Guess what, Rennie? They've always been fragile. Keep going.
Well, and the future seems just so uncertain to so many people around us. And I've been personally reflecting on our work here at Web in light of all these political and social and geopolitical forces. And I just know that moving forward and persevering this year is going to demand a lot of trust in ourselves, in our businesses, in the entrepreneurs, and the ecosystem that we are building around us and the entrepreneurs we work with.
Yeah, I agree. It is a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty. And yes, because of all this change, we decided this year to focus on our theme, which is with trust, we bridge the gap. With equity, we move forward. One of the reasons WEBB Squared exists is to help Black and Brown entrepreneurs navigate systemic barriers that are informed by race. These barriers exist in our mindsets, in our institutions, as policies, and our culture in how we do things.
That's right, Stephanie. As I was preparing for this season of our podcast, I thought it would be helpful to start by discussing the 2022 Chatham County Minority Entrepreneur and Small Business Assessment Needs Report. Wow. That is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
But it was commissioned by the Chatham County Commissioners in 2022 and conducted by UNC Keenan Flagler Business School. This report finds that while Chatham County is a magnet for both demographic and economic growth, and it is a prime spot for minority entrepreneurship and small business development, there are still so many barriers that entrepreneurs face as they develop their businesses. And I will be linking this report to the show notes so people can read it for themselves.
Yeah, the authors, is Dr. Johnson, right? He spent months interviewing Black and brown entrepreneurs and small business owners. And the findings were eye-opening, but not surprising, considering our nation's history. One of the main takeaways was the significant racial divide in business ownership within this county. The authors uncovered a deep-rooted distrust of government and support organizations that exist within minority communities. This distrust has many, many, many historical roots, and they are largely tied to Chatham County's history of racial tensions dating back to the Jim Crow era and segregation. Many of those who lived through these times are still here, and their attitudes that they pass down to the younger generations to either stay safe or stay in their lanes continue to influence how Black and brown communities engage with these systems today. And I just want to add, it's so understandable.
Isn't it true, Stephanie, that downtown Pittsburgh used to be like a lot of African American businesses?
I have heard that. Yes, there's Mary Nettles, who was one of our awardees, has documented all of these Black businesses that used to exist. And my question is, where are they? What happened?
Well, I'm hoping with our work at WEBB we can bring some of them back.
Right.
Stephanie, I remember during one of our early presentations to the Chatham Commissioners, an audience member expressed frustration that we talked about this history and actually asked us not to focus on the past, but focus on the future. And I came up with kind of a take on this relating to our mindset work. We often talk about these unconscious beliefs and biases, and it's tied into these cycles of socialization that we have where we, grow up in our families and our communities and our culture. And these mindsets and unconscious beliefs are deeply rooted in these cycles of socialization, which are inherently tied to our collective history. The desire to focus solely on the future without acknowledging the past overlooks the interconnectedness between the history, present, and future, and buries this history into our unconscious. Would you say that that's correct?
I would totally say that that is correct.
Okay. So I'm not totally off base here by saying that by uncovering these unconscious parts of our minds, including our historical context, we can create more powerful, inclusive mindsets. Collectively, I'm not sure how we can move forward if we ignore the history of slavery, of Jim Crow, our local history of Chatham and Pittsburgh. It's really disheartening to me that school boards across the country are rewriting history and taking these major things out so that we don't grow up understanding the past. And if we ignore the past in the present and we bury this history into our unconscious, well, as you always say, it's the unseen forces that have the most power over us.
Absolutely, because when it's invisible, you can't do anything about it. So I can share something. I remember when I first moved to Chatham, and I did not know a soul save two people. My new husband, which is why I moved to Chatham, and a friend, colleague who I had not spoken to in several years. Anyway, at that time, I was operating a successful catering company throughout the Triangle, and I was planning to move my operations to Chatham County. So I needed licensing and permitting to do so. I will never forget how not just deflated, but isolated, angered, hurt I felt when my attempt to navigate the process to get licensing was met with suspicion, skepticism, and a whole lot of closed and very hard to open doors. I had experienced some of that in my journey as an entrepreneur, but never to this extent. And I can remember thinking, if this is what it's like for me, what has it been like for other Black and brown entrepreneurs in this town?
And I can see that these are some of the reasons why this deep distrust has been created, and it creates barriers for growth for all minority-owned businesses. We can also talk about how entrepreneurship isn't evenly distributed across the racial lines in Chatham County. According to the assessment report in 2019, the small business ownership rate for whites was at 7.4%, while for Latinos and Hispanics is at 6.3% and 4% for African Americans. And of course, men always had the higher ownership rates than women. White men led the way at 9.8%, while Black women had the lowest rate at just 3.6.
Yeah. And this is exactly why WEBB Squared exists and why we're focusing on creating a living ecosystem of support for Black and brown entrepreneurs. We want to bridge the gap between small business support organizations and the entrepreneurs that we work with. Our goal is to help people navigate the support system for small businesses. We also want to spark the necessary conversations and build the relationships so that we can begin to show how distrust limits economic growth, not just for individuals, but for all people and for our community as a whole.
Yeah, it's not just about the distrust in these systems as you navigate your small business, but it actually can manifest in smaller ways too and limit the growth of your business just because it's part of your mindset. We've already touched on how historical and personal experiences can lead people to avoid accessing available resources and opportunities. But this distrust also has other things it does, and it can help hinder access to funding, mentorship, training, all of those little things that help a business grow.
Yep. Distrust also leads to a sense of isolation where business owners feel like they have to do everything on their own. There's this subconscious belief that no one else can do it better, or if I need it done on time, I got to do it, or if I need it done right, I have to do it by myself. This can prevent business owners from asking for help, from hiring people, or for delegating tasks, which stifles new ideas, it reduces their efficiency, and ultimately hinders their growth.
Stephanie, it kind of broke my heart when I was working with one of our entrepreneurs, and he said to me that he has to do all of this alone. And I had to remind him that, no, we're here, we want to help.
Right.
So distrust can also create these workplace environments with low morale and lack of collaboration amongst teammates. And this also reduces productivity. If you feel really tired because you've been on the floor all day and doing stuff, but you don't trust the people around you, it just takes a lot of energy out of you. And these just are creating environments with unhealthy or even toxic relationships between owners, employees, possible customers, team members, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. It's so important to recognize how distrust prevents collaborations and partnerships, and even just letting your own business expand. There's only so much one person or two people can do. So this lack of trust, it sabotages opportunities for partnerships and collaborations and expansion that can really help your business thrive.
Yeah, having a trust-centered mindset is actually very important, but it's also very nuanced. Our perspectives of what is trust, who we distrust, and how we navigate around that trust incorporates all the areas of the cycle of social.
That's a
I hate that word.
You listen. It's a what do they call that? A word twist?
It is a word twist. Cycle of
I
socialization.
dare you to try to say it 3 times.
I'm not going to. Anyway, you get the gist of what we're talking
Yes.
about.
Yes. So that's why we'll be discussing trust in this season on our podcast. And we're going to break it down into episodes because there's like so many angles to it. For example, trust is actually a mindset. And contrary to what people believe, it's not some soft, elusive quality that you either have or you don't. Yes, trust can be easily destroyed. But guess what, y'all? It can be rebuilt and restored. And when that happens, you know what? Y'all know that, right?
Yeah.
Working with me. But it can. You can build it back. And when you do, your relationship grows, your opportunities grow, and most importantly, when you're working in an organization, your efficiency grows. So trust is actually tangible, actionable, and it's an asset that you can create.
Yes, and at some point soon, we're going to be talking about the speed of trust and how when we have more trust, we can get more done.
Yep.
But in the meantime, for the next few episodes, we're going to share our research, some experiences we've had, some perspectives, and we will touch on this speed of trust and how that transformation might happen at a much faster rate than you ever imagined.
Yep.
And the next week, we'll talk more about the trust mindset. And Stephanie, knowing how much you love talking about brain science, I found a very thought-provoking article on neuroscience and trust that I'll be sharing with you and our listeners.
I can't wait, Rinnie, because you know I'm a brain science nerd. Ooh, one day we're just going to have a podcast just about that. But anyway, let's wrap it up today, Rinnie. But you know we got to go into our gratitude moment. Well, I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful for my family. I'm all about family this year.
You know what? I
What?
hear your family
I
outside the
know.
podcast room. Should we have them come on and say hi on the end of the podcast here? No? Okay.
Rinnie, you know I gotta get them, let them get them.
I know,
But anyway, y'all, yeah, my grandchildren are hanging out with me at work today.
and so if you hear the noise in the background,
That's what it is. But yeah, I'm grateful for my grandchildren. They bring me a lot of joy. And because I get to practice when I messed up on their parents. But can I say that I'm also grateful for this web team. We have gone through so much and we're still standing. And
We're still talking.
we're grateful for a new year and all what's present. What about you, Rich?
Well, I am just going to express gratitude for everything Web's doing right now. It feels like things have come into a full circle, and all of the experimentation, all of the things that we've been doing over the few years have seemed to come together, and we seem to be flowing in a we're not tottering anymore like we were when we were infants. And many times these past few years, we would experiment, we would create, and we'd have to pivot, and we'd experiment again, and we'd create, and we'd pivot. And that's kind of how we were building this organization. But in the past few months, and especially as I've been putting together our 2024 annual report, I see a buildup in consistency and practice. We know what relationships we're building, we know what programs and services we're offering, and we know why we're making the decisions we are making. And it's just a great place to be. It's a very freeing place to be. So for all of that, and you and Joseph, I am very thankful.
Oh, thanks, Rennie. I feel all of that too. I would just say ditto. So it's time to close. But before we close, we're introducing two new things. Well, one is a thing and then one is a person. We have a new segment to our podcast called Ponder This, where we wrap up our conversation with some personal reflection questions. And we really want y'all to listen to these questions and think about them, because it's the questions that lead you to your own answers. And the voice that you'll hear is our newest member to the WEBB team. He is our communications liaison through the AmeriCorps Vista program, and his name is Joseph Holmes, and he is absolutely amazing. We are super grateful that he's with us. And so with that said, our evolution begins with what, Rinnie?
Dialogue.
We will never, ever stop talking. Ever. Don't ever stop talking. To people, y'all, not to the,
Devices.
yes. That's it.
Ponder this. How does the theme, with trust we bridge the gap, with equity we move forward, resonate with your personal or professional experiences? In what ways have you observed or experienced the impact of historical distrust on minority entrepreneurship in your community? What are some unconscious biases or beliefs you've recognized in yourself or others that might hinder trust building in your personal or professional setting? How has distrust manifested in your own business experiences or those you've observed? What were the consequences?
Thank you for listening to the WEBB Remedy podcast, a mindset shifting project of WEBB Squared. Wealth Through Entrepreneurship for Black and Brown Businesses is a North Carolina nonprofit located in Chatham County. We offer incubator accelerator business services to Black and BIPOC entrepreneurs. Our podcast hosts are Stephanie Terry and Rinnie, the co-founders of WEBB Squared. We realize that building an ecosystem of support is critical to achieving our mission. Your donation to WEBB supports the podcast, WEBB's coaching services, and the promotion of the businesses and entrepreneurs we serve. To learn more about WEBB Squared, please visit our website at webbsquared.org.